Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the studio here at Columbus State in the College of Education and Health Professions. As you just saw there, that's Sean Cruzen from the Coca-Cola Space Science Center in downtown Columbus as part of College of Education and Health Professions. I'm Michael Baltimore, and I'm fortunate to have Sean join me today, and we're going to talk about all the events and some of the interesting information coming up about what's going on in our universe. So who better to help us with that than Sean? Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here. Happy to be here with you.
Yes, tell us a little bit about some of the important things that are going on today. We just had an introduction a moment ago of some really interesting sounds.
Yeah, that was a interesting audio file that was just released, and it turns out there's a spacecraft that's orbiting the planet Saturn right now. And among the many sensors that the spacecraft has on it, there's one that actually measures radio waves coming from the plasma generated within Saturn's magnetic field, and particularly within the rings of Saturn. And what the scientists have done is they've taken those radio waves and they've lowered those frequencies down into the audio range. In other words, in the range of frequencies that we can hear, they've converted them to sound waves, and they've allowed us to hear, in essence, the radio waves that are being generated within the rings of Saturn. And so that really kind of eerie sci-fi sounding noise that you heard at the top of the show right there were actually sound waves that were generated by the radio waves coming from the rings of Saturn.
So the actual sound waves. Let's listen to that just for a moment here, and I'll pull this up so our audience can hear it. Wow, very interesting.
Doesn't it sound like it comes right out of a 50s sci-fi movie?
Yeah, I think it does.
So,
it is. It's what I imagined.
It came from outer space, right?
That's right.
And this time it really did.
Well, there's really nothing wrong with that. I guess I need to buy the album. Maybe download the MP3 file of that. So, what else is going on, Sean?
Well, before we get too far off that subject, let me tell you that the actual artists and musicians have taken those audio files that are being generated by astronomers, and they've actually incorporated them into some music and some music DVDs that are actually available. So you can go out and buy a DVD of kind of ambient music that is partly generated actually by these interesting nature phenomenons coming from space. Good fun stuff.
Well, I tell you what, I've heard some music that actually that's much better. So I look forward to, maybe I'm going to look for those albums in there. All right, well, thanks for sharing that with us.
No problem.
What else?
You know, a very interesting day on the sun, as it turns out. The stereo spacecraft, there's actually two spacecraft that are monitoring the sun 24/7, and they're looking for solar activity. The stereo spacecraft, though, occasionally will catch images of something drifting into the field of view that is not the sun. And today they actually were releasing images of a comet that's actually on a collision course with the sun. So today, spaceweather.com, you can go to that website, you can actually watch a comet falling into the sun. Now, I realize that some people may be watching this as not a live broadcast, but you can still go to Space Weather and be able to link to the SOHO satellite. The SOHO satellite will actually have images of a comet on a death plunge as it falls into the sun. Now, of course, a comet it's a big ball of ice, so as it gets closer to the sun, it begins to melt and leave this big tail out behind it. But when they get this close to the sun, this is called a sun-grazing comet, and the comet will actually fall into the photosphere of the sun and eventually be destroyed. But just kind of a neat thing that we can pick up this comet as it's on its final pass by the sun, or actually into the sun in this case. And so that's actually out there and available.
Wow.
Now, something that's interesting, while that comet's falling into the sun, over the last several months and maybe even a couple of years, the sun has been unusually quiet. In other words, there's been a low in the solar phenomenon that is a 100-year low. The sun usually goes on an 11-year cycle of activity. But for the last couple of years, there's been almost no sunspot activity, no solar flares, and the sun has been unusually quiet. Well, it's just now starting to heat back up again. And right now on the face of the sun, you can actually see a large solar flare, a large solar set of sunspots that are generating solar flares. And so the sunspot group is passing on the face of the sun, and it's actually just bursting as it goes across the face of the sun with solar flares right now. So
Now,
go to the
you know-
SOHO spacecraft, you can see both the flares and the comet.
Oh, wow. So both of those. Now, and you guys have a telescope aimed at the sun.
We do. We have a solar observatory at the Space Science Center where we try to also monitor these activities. Unfortunately, I should say, nature has blessed us with a little rain today. So we're hoping those clouds clear out by tomorrow, which will be Friday, and we'll be able to open up the observatory again and get some images of this big sunspot group as it goes across. Now, people can actually take advantage of our live streaming solar webcasts, and they can find the link for that solar webcast right on our front page. So if they go to our website, which is www.ccsssc.org, Charlie, Sam, Charlie.org, go to that website and pull it up the front page. Right there on the front page will be a link to the solar webcast, and it has a schedule when it tells you when our cameras at the telescope will be live, taking live images of the sun.
Wow, that is truly fantastic, and you're really monitoring that 24/7. That's a regular process for you at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center.
Yeah, and actually we monitor the NASA satellites 24/7. We have a schedule when our telescope's actually open and observing the sun. We try to get students. That's a student-run project, so we try to get a schedule where students are in there each and every clear day, where we can try to be taking some kind of solar imaging every clear day of the week.
Wow, that is fantastic. Now, you talked about a crater on the moon as well. I heard that earlier. Tell us a little bit about that.
If folks look up at the moon or look at a photograph of the moon, there's one crater in particular that's down toward the center bottom that looks like a big spider web, almost like a broken piece of glass or something. And that crater is called Tycho. And the reason we see that kind of starfish appearance from crater Tycho is because it's one of the most recent large craters anywhere on the face of the moon. Just recently, the LRO, which stands for Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, a NASA spacecraft that's in orbit around the moon, got some new close-up and ultra close-up photographs of the center of that particular crater up there on the moon. And the purpose for them taking this imaging was to try to get an idea about the date when this impact event happened. Of course, these big craters are made by very large rocks, asteroids, small asteroids flying through the inner part of the solar system, impacting the moon and forming those big craters, those big splashes on the moon. If you were to actually look inside the rays, if you could go up there and scoop up a little of that soil, what you would find is actually glass. You'd find little fragments of glass from superheated soil that was turned into glass. So, how do you make a glass? Well, you take some sand and get it real hot, and that's not exactly the process, but the idea is that you can get glass out of that. The natural occurrence of that happens during these very large impacts on the surface of the moon, where big meteorite or a big asteroid from space impacts the surface of the moon, causes debris to spray out all over the surface of the moon, and within those debris rays, we find this obsidian, this glass that's formed within these impacts.
Wow, that is truly fascinating. Now, I understand also that NASA has this next generation rocket, and something's going on with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually the Constellation program. The space capsule is called the Orion space capsule. It's been the system that NASA has been planning to replace the shuttle with. Well, now it's been called into question whether or not, over the last year or so, there's been a review panel reviewing whether or not the Orion spacecraft will ever really fly. And there have been some ideas about whether or not it should. Unfortunately, the Orion project, the Constellation program, is very advanced. They've already flown the rocket. They're already assembling the space capsule. If they were to stop that program now and take a different direction, of course, there will obviously be a lot of people's wasted time, wasted financial resources that have gone into the program at this time. It turns out on February 1st, President Obama is going to issue his budget request for NASA, and that really will answer the question about whether or not the Orion capsule and the Constellation program will go forward, or whether NASA is going to turn and go a different direction. So a really interesting couple of weeks here in the future of NASA that are going to be taking place.
It really sounds like this is maybe a critical time.
It is a very critical time. It's a serious turning point for the entire human spaceflight program from the United States of America.
Well, I certainly understand that there's so many national issues and universal issues, if you will, going on. But tell us a little bit about the Coca-Cola Space Science Center here in the College of Education and Health Professions. There must be so many training opportunities, other things that are going on. Yeah. What's your calendar like?
Our calendar for the springtime ends up being rather full, as it turns out. we're among the many things that we have going on. One of the things we're doing right now is we're doing teacher training. We're doing a teacher workshop from teachers from Macon County School District. We have the high school teachers that were in yesterday and today. In fact, I was down doing an activity with them earlier on, and we had a great time. We weighed the planet Jupiter. We discovered the mass of Jupiter by simply watching the moons go around, and that's a nice activity.
Wait a minute. I'm not sure I understand that. You know, you that came by very, very fast. Slow it down for the rest of us and tell us a little bit about what happened.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You know, how do we know what the mass of the planet Jupiter is? It's a reasonable question that astronomy students ask me a lot. And the answer is, well, we can't take Jupiter and set it on a scale. It's just a little too big. So there must be some other way to find the mass of Jupiter. It turns out that we can discover Jupiter's mass by watching how its gravity affects other objects. So we watch the moons that are in orbit around Jupiter, and we watch the period of time they take to orbit and the distance out from the center of the planet. And there's a mathematical principle that we invoke called Kepler's third law that allows us to be able to use those two pieces of data to discover what the mass of the central body is. In this case, it would be Jupiter. And so we did a simulated program of observation today with these teachers where they actually watched the moons of Jupiter go around. They made a sine, they plotted out a sine curve that told them what the period of the orbit of the moon was and what the semi-major axis or the distance from the planet was. And with those two pieces of data and Kepler's third law, they were actually able to ascertain what the mass of the planet was. Now this is a simulated observing session on a computer,
right.
But they're just kind of hovering a mouse over the positions of the moon and making measurements to the best that they can with accuracy. One group measured the mass to within less than 3% error.
Wow!
So you can see that this is a highly accurate technique, and it's one that certainly mathematicians from earlier times used, but now we can use today to even figure out the masses of planets that are orbiting other stars.
Okay.
We use a very similar technique for that, and to be able to determine the mass of the star, but then eventually also the mass of the planet as well.
Wow, that is very fascinating. I also understand that there's some seismography that's going on as well at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center.
Yeah, it's been a terrible tragedy to watch the events in Haiti unfold, and our hearts have gone out to those folks, and highly encourage people who are out there listening to me, make a donation, help out in any way that you can with the rescue efforts and the recovery efforts for that nation. We, as a scientific curiosity, have a seismograph at the Space Science Center that not only recorded the main event, not only recorded the secondary aftershock, but for days has been recording just noise, just vibrational noise from the series of Earth movements that have taken place since that major quake. People don't really realize this, but once an earthquake happens like that, the Earth kind of rings like a bell. And so there's a whole series of vibrations that take place and reoccur long after that primary shock is over. Our seismograph at the Space Science Center has been registering that for the last 48 hours in particular since that aftershock has occurred. And still today even, we're seeing some of that noise on the seismograph at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center.
Wow. Well, now I understand also that Astronomy Night is coming up. Tell us about that.
We have an Astronomy Night coming up at the end of this month on January 30th, but it's also a unique opportunity, and that's this. Look, a lot of people out there got a telescope for Christmas. And if you've gotten a telescope for Christmas and you have no idea how to use it, or if you bought somebody else a telescope for Christmas and they have no idea how to use it, which happens a lot, by the way, don't feel bad about that, bring them on down to the Space Science Center on the 30th of January in the afternoon at 4 o'clock. We're going to have a special program called So You Just Bought a Telescope. And it's going to be a program for an opportunity for you to be able to bring your telescope down, have the professionals at the Space Science Center show you not only how the telescope itself works, what part goes where, all that kind of stuff, but also to talk you through how to go out and do some observing, how to start your process of learning the nighttime sky, and just really get you going on the fantastic hobby of amateur astronomy. And again, that will take place on the 30th of January, starting at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And then that night, we actually have one of our astronomy open houses at the Space Science Center. So if you hang around after that workshop, we can actually take your telescope out under the real nighttime sky and help you point it and help you find various objects that we can see in the nighttime sky as well. So this is a really great opportunity. Again, if you're just taking that plunge, getting into into the great hobby of amateur astronomy. Come on down and let us help you out a little bit with that.
Wow, that is a nice service. I think there's probably a lot of people out there who have bought that telescope and now what? And maybe to have your experts help them with that, I think that's a great service to the community. So you've really got a full schedule that goes on constantly at the center.
There's almost always something taking place at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center. We try to keep the place hopping and rocking just as much as we possibly can. And so we really appreciate the community support. And if you haven't been down to the Space Science Center lately and seen a show in our planetarium, we'd invite you to come on down and see one of those. We're running right now In My Backyard, which is a show for little kids. So if you know some of the younger folks out there in the audience, bring them down. The neat thing about that show is all the graphics for that show were produced in-house by Christiana Unesi and Lance Tankersley, our animators, and Chris Johnson, our graphic artist. They work together on those visuals, and so that's an original Columbus State University Coca-Cola Space Science Center production, In My Backyard. But we also have Black Holes, Ice Worlds, lots of other great shows taking place at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center.
Wow, there's so many things going on. Sean, thank you so much for being with us today. I can't thank you enough for providing so much information, and it's just amazing how much you have going on down there. And I want to invite all of our viewers and those in the community to go down, meet Sean, go to the Coca-Cola Space Science Center, look at that schedule, go to the website. We'll pull up the website here, and I tell you, Sean, on the way out, can we play that those sounds of the Saturn rings again as we go out?
I wish you would. I personally love to hear weird sounds from space. I think it's great.
All right, and here it comes. Thanks, everyone, for watching and tuning in to our show here from the Coca-Cola Space Science Center. Again, thank you, Sean Cruzen, the director there, and we wish you the best. So thank you a lot.
Thanks,
you.
Sean. Appreciate it.